Parents always favored my sister and kicked me out over a missing bracelet. So when Grandma gave me the family inheritance years later, instead of her, they showed up at my door crying. From as far back as I can remember, my sister Emma was the golden child. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. If she brought home a decent grade, it was celebrated like she had won a Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, my accomplishments, no matter how significant, barely earned a passing comment. I was always second place in our family, and the rules were clear. Emma came first. It wasn't just the big things, like the extra attention she got, or the way my parents seemed to revolve their lives around her. It was the small things too. She got the last piece of cake at birthdays, the front seat on car rides, and the most extravagant gifts at Christmas. At first, I tried to win their approval. I worked hard in school, brought home good grades, and even won a few awards. But no matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. My parents would nod politely and say, "That's nice," before turning their attention back to Emma. One year, I spent weeks saving up to buy my mom a beautiful bracelet for her birthday. It wasn't expensive, but it was elegant and thoughtfully chosen. When the day came, I handed it to her with a smile, excited to see her reaction. She opened the box, looked at it briefly, and said, "Oh, that's sweet. Emma got me something similar last year." That moment solidified what I had known all along. I would always be an afterthought. Emma, on the other hand, thrived in her role as the favorite. She wasn't just spoiled, she was manipulative. If something went wrong, she always found a way to shift the blame onto me. And my parents? They believed her every time. As we grew older, the divide between us only deepened. Emma was given every opportunity: dance lessons, summer camps, new clothes, and the latest gadgets. I got hand-me-downs and lectures about the value of hard work. "You're the strong one," my mom would say. "Emma needs more support." It was a justification I heard over and over, a way to excuse the blatant favoritism that defined our family dynamic. By the time I reached my late teens, I had stopped trying to win their approval. I kept my head down, worked part-time jobs to save for college and plan my escape. But just when I thought I could endure the favoritism long enough to leave quietly, everything came crashing down. Everything came to a head during my senior year of high school. By that point, I was counting down the days until I could leave for college and escape the suffocating favoritism that defined my home life. But one incident made it clear that leaving wouldn't just be a choice, it would be a necessity. It started on an ordinary Friday evening. I had just gotten home from work when I noticed a strange tension in the house. My mom was pacing the living room, her face tight with anger. Emma sat on the couch, her arms crossed, looking every bit the victim in some invisible drama. "What's going on?" I asked cautiously, setting my bag down. My mom spun around, her eyes narrowing. "Where is it?" she demanded. "Where's what?" I asked, confused. "The bracelet," she snapped. "Emma's bracelet. The one your grandma gave her last Christmas. It's missing, and Emma says you were the last one in her room." I stared at her, stunned. "I haven't been in Emma's room," I said firmly. But Emma was quick to counter. "That's not true," she said, her voice trembling just enough to seem convincing. "You were in there this morning, looking for your charger. I saw you." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I wasn't looking for anything in your room," I said, my voice steady despite the rising panic in my chest. "Why would I take your bracelet?" "Maybe you were jealous," Emma said, her tone shifting from victim to accuser. "You've always hated that Grandma gave it to me and not you." "That's ridiculous," I shot back, but my parents weren't interested in hearing my side. "You've always been jealous of Emma," my dad said, his voice cold. "You don't know how to appreciate what you have." "Appreciate what?" I asked, anger bubbling to the surface. "You've spent my entire life making me feel like I'm not enough, like nothing I do will ever compare to Emma. And now you're accusing me of stealing? Based on what?" Her word. My mom's expression hardened. "Don't talk to us like that," she said. "You need to take responsibility for your actions." "I didn't take it," I yelled. The argument spiraled from there, with my parents refusing to believe me no matter what I said. Emma sat quietly, watching the chaos unfold with a small, satisfied smile that only I seemed to notice. By the end of the night, My parents had made up their minds. "If you can't be honest with us," my mom said, "then you can't stay here. Pack your things and leave." Her words hit me like a freight train. I had known they favored Emma, but I never thought they'd go this far. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Completely," my dad said. "We won't tolerate a thief in this house." I looked at Emma, hoping for even a shred of remorse or guilt, but she just stared back at me, unbothered. With no other choice, I packed a bag and left that night. As I walked out the door, I promised myself one thing. I would never let them make me feel worthless again. Walking out of my parents' house that night felt like stepping into the unknown. I had a duffel bag slung over my shoulder, a wallet with barely enough money for a few nights' stay at a cheap motel, and no idea what my next move would be. The weight of their betrayal was crushing, but I knew I couldn't let it break me. I spent the first night in a rundown motel on the edge of town. The room smelled faintly of mildew, and the lumpy mattress did little to soothe my exhaustion. As I lay there staring at the cracked ceiling, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, except, perhaps, Grandma. My grandmother, who lived a few towns over, had always been the one person in my family who treated me with kindness and fairness. She didn't play favorites, and she never bought into the narrative that Emma was flawless. If anyone could help me through this, it was her. The next morning, I mustered the courage to call her. "Hi, Grandma," I said, my voice trembling. "Michael," she said, her concern evident. "What's wrong, dear?" I hesitated for a moment, then poured out everything. The accusation, the fight, my parents kicking me out. By the time I finished, my throat felt raw, and tears were streaming down my face. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly, "I'm so sorry they've done this to you. You don't deserve any of it." She didn't hesitate. "Pack your things and come here," she said. "You'll stay with me for as long as you need." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, my voice breaking. Later that day, I arrived at her house, a cozy, welcoming place that felt like the complete opposite of my parents' home. Grandma greeted me with open arms, pulling me into a hug that made me feel, for the first time in days, like I wasn't completely alone. "Let's get you settled," she said, leading me to the guest room. Over the next few weeks, I began to rebuild my life. With Grandma's support, I found a part-time job at a local cafe and enrolled in community college. It wasn't the grand future I had envisioned, but it was a start, and it was mine. Grandma's unwavering belief in me became my anchor. She listened without judgment when I vented about my parents and Emma, offering words of wisdom and encouragement that I hadn't realized I needed. "People show you who they really are when times get tough," she said one evening as we sat on her porch. "Your parents made their choice, and it's not your job to fix it. Focus on building a life that makes you happy." Her words stuck with me. Slowly but surely, things began to improve. I worked hard, saved every penny I could, and eventually transferred to a 4-year university. Grandma cheered me on every step of the way, celebrating my achievements as if they were her own. Through it all, I kept my distance from my parents and Emma. They didn't call, and I didn't reach out. The hurt was still too raw, and I wasn't ready to face them. Not yet. But even as I moved forward, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if they ever regretted what they had done. A few years after moving in with Grandma, life looked completely different. I had graduated from college, secured a stable job, and was well on my way to building a future I could be proud of. Grandma had been my rock through it all. Her unwavering support was a reminder that family wasn't just about blood, but about love and loyalty. Though I had little contact with my parents and Emma, I still saw them during the holidays. Grandma insisted on hosting Christmas dinner every year, saying it was the one time the family should come together. Reluctantly, I agreed to attend, mostly for her sake. That year, Christmas dinner began like any other. Grandma's house was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of roasting turkey and freshly baked pies. The table was beautifully set, and the tree in the corner sparkled with twinkling lights. But the atmosphere was tense. Emma sat across from me, her demeanor smug as always. My parents chatted with her animatedly, lavishing her with attention while barely acknowledging my presence. I had grown used to their favoritism, but being back in the same room with them brought back a flood of memories I'd rather forget. As we ate, Grandma kept the conversation light, asking about everyone's lives. Emma, of course, dominated the discussion, boasting about her latest accomplishments and plans for the future. My parents hung on her every word, their pride unmistakable. When Grandma turned to me, asking about my job and recent move, my parents barely reacted. Their indifference stung, but I pushed it aside, focusing instead on the genuine interest in Grandma's eyes. After dessert, as we all sat in the living room, Grandma cleared her throat. "I have something I need to share with all of you," she said, her tone serious. The room fell silent as she stood and retrieved a folder from a nearby drawer. She held it tightly, her expression calm but resolute. "This is my will," she said, holding up the folder, "and I wanted to let you all know about some decisions I've made." My parents exchanged confused glances, and Emma's smug expression faltered slightly. "I've decided to leave the house and most of my estate to Michael," Grandma said firmly, looking directly at me. The room erupted. "What?" my mom exclaimed, her face pale. "You can't be serious," Emma said, her voice sharp. Grandma held up a hand, silencing them. "I've thought long and hard about this," she said. "Michael has been by my side through everything. He's worked hard to build his life without asking for handouts, and he's shown me nothing but love and respect." My dad leaned forward, his tone angry. "Mom, this isn't fair. Emma's your granddaughter too." "Of course she is," Grandma replied, her voice calm but unwavering. "And I love her. But this isn't about fairness. It's about rewarding kindness and dedication. Michael has earned this." Emma looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "So what? You're just going to take it?" she sneered. I met her gaze, my voice steady. "I didn't ask for this, Emma, but I'm not going to apologize for the choices Grandma made." My mom shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "This is going to tear the family apart," she said. "The family was already divided," Grandma said bluntly. "You made sure of that when you chose to turn your back on Michael." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. For the rest of the evening, the tension was palpable. My parents and Emma barely spoke, their anger simmering just below the surface. I stayed quiet, still processing what had happened. When they finally left, Grandma pulled me into a hug. "You deserve this," she said softly. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." The days following Grandma's announcement were a whirlwind of chaos. What should have been a quiet, reflective time after Christmas turned into a full-blown family meltdown. My parents and Emma were furious, and they made no effort to hide it. It started with the phone calls. "Michael, you need to talk to Grandma," my mom said during the first call, her tone sharp and accusatory. "She's not thinking clearly. This whole inheritance thing is ridiculous." "She's thinking more clearly than you ever have," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "She made her decision, and I'm not going to undermine her." "She's being manipulated," my dad chimed in, having taken the phone from my mom. "You've been living with her, feeding her all kinds of stories, and now she thinks you're some kind of saint." The audacity of his words made me laugh bitterly. Manipulated? All I've done is live my life and support Grandma the way she supported me. If that's manipulation, maybe you should take a closer look at yourselves. They hung up in frustration, but the calls didn't stop. Emma called next, her approach more calculated. "Michael," she began, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I know we've had our differences, but we're still family. Don't you think Grandma's decision is a bit extreme?" "No, I don't," I said flatly. "Come on," she pressed. "You don't even want that big house. What are you going to do with it? Wouldn't it make more sense for Mom and Dad to live there? They could use the space." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "This isn't about what makes sense to you, Emma. It's about what Grandma wants. And what she wants is for me to have the house." Her tone shifted, becoming more hostile. "You're being selfish," she snapped. "You're going to let this tear the family apart, all because you can't let go of some stupid inheritance?" "This family was torn apart long before Grandma's decision," I said firmly, "and it's not my job to fix what you all broke." After that, the phone calls turned into surprise visits. One evening, I came home from work to find my parents standing on Grandma's porch. My mom's face was streaked with tears, while my dad looked grim and determined. "We need to talk," my dad said as I approached. "What now?" I asked, already exhausted. "Your grandmother isn't thinking clearly," he said. "We need to sit down as a family and figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out," I replied. "Grandma's made her decision, and I'm respecting it." "Michael, please," my mom pleaded. "This isn't right. That house has always been part of the family. It should stay that way." "It is staying in the family," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Grandma wants me to have it, and that's final." They argued for nearly an hour, trying every tactic from guilt to reason to outright anger. But I stood my ground, refusing to budge. The final straw came when Emma started spreading rumors among our extended family. "She's telling everyone you manipulated Grandma into changing her will," Clara, a cousin, told me during a phone call. "She's making it sound like you took advantage of her." I was furious but unsurprised. Emma had always been good at twisting the narrative to make herself look like the victim. "Let them think what they want," I said. "The people who matter know the truth." Despite my attempts to stay calm, the constant pressure took its toll. I confided in Grandma, who listened patiently and offered her unwavering support. "Let them talk," she said. "I'm not changing my mind, and neither should you." Her words strengthened my resolve. In the months following Grandma's announcement, the tension in the family simmered but never truly boiled over, until the cracks in Emma's perfect image began to show. It started subtly. Small whispers among extended family members hinted that Emma wasn't as flawless as my parents had always portrayed her. At first, I dismissed it as idle gossip, but as the stories began to align, a clearer picture emerged. One day, Clara, my cousin who had always been quietly supportive, called me with a revelation. "Michael, I think you should know something," she said cautiously. "What's going on?" I asked, bracing myself. "There's been talk about Emma's finances," she said. "Apparently, she's in a lot of debt. Credit cards, loans, it's bad." I frowned, caught off guard. Emma had always flaunted her lavish lifestyle. The designer clothes, the vacations, the expensive car. It had never occurred to me that it might all be a facade. "That's not all," Clara continued. "Some family members are saying she's asked them for money, claiming she needs help to stay afloat." I felt a mix of shock and vindication. For years, Emma had been placed on a pedestal, her every whim catered to while I was left to fend for myself. And now, the golden child was struggling to keep her carefully crafted image from crumbling. Things escalated when I overheard a heated conversation between Grandma and my mom. "You can't keep bailing her out," Grandma said firmly. "She's an adult, and it's time she starts acting like one. She just needs a little help," my mom pleaded. "She's going through a rough patch." "A rough patch of her own making," Grandma countered. "I won't enable her poor decisions, and neither should you." Their argument was like peeling back the curtain on years of family dynamics. Emma's entitlement, my parents' enabling. It all made sense now. It didn't take long for the rest of the family to catch on. Rumors of Emma's financial troubles spread, and her once spotless reputation began to tarnish. Some family members even started questioning my parents' favoritism, wondering aloud if their constant support had done more harm than good. Through it all, I stayed quiet. Watching the truth unfold was bittersweet. It was vindicating to see the golden child face the consequences of her actions, but it was also a stark reminder of the years I had spent feeling invisible and undervalued. One evening, Emma showed up at Grandma's house, her usual confidence replaced with desperation. "Grandma, I need your help," she said, her voice shaky. Grandma didn't mince words. "I've helped you enough, Emma. It's time for you to take responsibility for your choices." "But," Emma began, but Grandma cut her off. "No buts," she said firmly. "Michael has proven himself to be hardworking and trustworthy, and that's why I chose to leave the house to him. If you want help, you need to start proving the same." Emma left in tears, and my mom called later that night to chastise Grandma for being too harsh. But Grandma stood her ground, and for the first time, I felt like someone truly had my back. The fallout from Emma's unraveling didn't magically fix my relationship with my parents, But it shifted the dynamic. They stopped pressuring me about the inheritance and even began to distance themselves from Emma's problems. As for me, I focused on moving forward. I used the stability Grandma had given me to continue building my life, growing in my career, and creating a future that wasn't tethered to the past. Looking back, I realized that the favoritism and betrayal I had experienced weren't just about Emma. They were about my parents' inability to see beyond their own biases. But their short-sightedness didn't define me. Grandma's belief in me, my own resilience, and the life I had built from the ground up, that was what defined me. To anyone who has ever felt overshadowed, overlooked, or undervalued, I want to say this. You are more than the way others treat you. You have the power to rise above their doubts, to create a life that reflects your worth, and to surround yourself with people who truly see you. Here's to choosing yourself, no matter what.